Look at a satellite image of the Australian Northern Territory, stretching from the Indian Ocean coastline of Western Australia all the way across the Gulf of Carpentaria to the remote edges of far north Queensland. For the vast majority of modern history, if a strategic planner sitting in a command bunker in Beijing or Moscow looked at this imagery, they saw nothing but an endless, uninhabited expanse of red dirt, spinifex grass, and crocodile-infested river systems. It was a geographic void. It was an empty quarter. The military infrastructure that did exist was intentionally skeletal. The Royal Australian Air Force maintained a chain of what were known as bare bases, strips of reinforced concrete baking in the tropical sun, surrounded by a chain-link fence and perhaps a solitary caretaker. They were tripwires designed to be spun up only if the absolute worst-case scenario materialized and a hostile power attempted to land on Australian shores. But if you look at the highly classified high-resolution satellite imagery today, that empty quarter is unrecognizable. The red dirt is being aggressively, violently carved open by armadas of heavy earth-moving equipment. Millions of tons of specialized military-grade concrete are being poured continuously, day and night. The skeletal airstrips are mutating into sprawling, heavily fortified military megacomplexes. Massive, subterranean bunkers are being excavated deep into the bedrock. The Australian outback is undergoing the most radical, expensive, and lethal terraforming project in the history of the Southern Hemisphere. The bare base strategy is officially dead. The era of passive, reactive defense has been incinerated. The United States of America and the Commonwealth of Australia have recognized that the geopolitical tectonic plates of the Indo-Pacific are shifting toward a high-intensity, peer-to-peer conflict. In response, they are not just building a few extra hangars. They are physically engineering the top half of the Australian continent into a massive, interconnected, highly resilient launching pad for global war. They are building the Northern Engine. It is the ultimate unsinkable aircraft carrier. And it is designed to project overwhelming, devastating strike power directly into the throat of the South China Sea. Welcome to Doctrine of War. Today we are executing a deep-dive forensic analysis into the most massive, highly classified base expansion in the modern history of the Anglosphere. Here is the thesis for this episode. Geography is completely useless unless you possess the political will and the industrial capacity to weaponize it. For 2 centuries, Australia's massive size and isolation were viewed as a logistical curse, the tyranny of distance. Today, the United States and Australia are pouring billions of dollars into the outback to turn that distance into the ultimate, impenetrable shield, and the ultimate, devastating spear. If you are beginning to understand why the true balance of global power is not decided by diplomatic summits, but by the relentless pouring of concrete, the hardening of fuel lines, and the brutal mathematics of expeditionary logistics, hit that like button and subscribe to Doctrine of War. We strip away the political rhetoric to bring you the cold, kinetic realities of how the free world actually builds, sustains, and deters. Your support ensures we can keep delivering this level of uncompromising strategic analysis. For years, the media has focused obsessively on the Chinese military building artificial islands in the South China Sea. But the West has not been sitting idle. The West has been building a continental fortress. We are going to break down the $1.6 billion spearhead, the staggering, massive transformation of RAAF base Tindal into a joint, untouchable apex predator nest for American strategic bombers. We are going to explore the web of dispersal, how the expansion of remote outposts like Learmonth and Curtin enables the agile combat employment doctrine, creating a continent-wide shell game that makes Allied fighter jets impossible to target. And we will analyze the arteries of war, the unglamorous but absolutely vital construction of hardened fuel reserves and munitions depots that guarantee the Allied war machine will never run out of gas, even if the Pacific is blockaded. Let us begin by looking at the centerpiece of this massive industrial awakening, and the terrifying hardware it is designed to host: the death of the bare base. To understand the sheer, overwhelming magnitude of what is happening in the Australian outback, you have to look at the financial and engineering realities of RAAF base Tindal. Located approximately 320 kilometers southeast of the coastal city of Darwin, Tindal sits deep enough inland to be protected from devastating tropical cyclones and coastal storm surges, but close enough to the northern coast to serve as the perfect springboard into the Indonesian archipelago and the Philippine Sea. For decades, Tindal was a functional but relatively quiet regional base, primarily serving as the home for a single squadron of Australian F/A-18 Hornets, and eventually F-35A Lightning IIs. It was a fighter base, geared toward localized air defense and regional patrols. But as the People's Liberation Army (PLA) rapidly expanded its rocket force, explicitly developing intermediate-range ballistic missiles (IRBMs), like the DF-26 to destroy American bomber bases in Guam and Okinawa. The strategic calculus of the Pentagon violently shifted. The United States Air Force realized that parking its multi-billion-dollar strategic bomber fleet on isolated, easily targeted Pacific islands was a mathematical suicide pact. They needed a sanctuary. They needed strategic depth. The United States and Australia locked arms and pointed to Tindal. Overnight, Tindal ceased to be just an Australian fighter base. It was designated as the primary spearhead for American strategic air power in the Southern Hemisphere. To achieve this, the two nations initiated a staggering, massive capital injection of over $1.6 billion. This is not a cosmetic upgrade. This is the total structural re-engineering of a military facility to handle the heaviest, most destructive, and most highly classified assets in the Western arsenal. The Earth-moving operations currently underway at Tindal are visible from low Earth orbit. They are systematically extending the primary runways and reinforcing the subbase. The asphalt and concrete required for fighter jets is entirely inadequate for the Leviathans of the U.S. Air Force. When a fully loaded, fully fueled strategic bomber lands, the kinetic energy and the sheer crushing weight will shatter a standard runway. The $1.6 billion buys specially formulated, deep-pour military-grade concrete designed to withstand the relentless punishment of expeditionary heavy bomber operations. But the runway is only the beginning. The expansion includes the construction of massive, sprawling new parking aprons. These aprons are explicitly, mathematically designed to house a continuous, rotating squadron of up to 6 United States Air Force B-52 Stratofortress bombers. By pouring this concrete, Australia and the United States are cementing a permanent, unyielding message to Beijing. The American bomber fleet is no longer constrained to the Northern Hemisphere. The spearhead has been moved, and it is now buried deep inside an untouchable continental fortress, the apex predator's nest. Let us analyze the specific hardware that this $1.6 billion fortress is being built to host, because the hardware dictates the lethality of the strategy. The B-52 Stratofortress is a 60-year-old airframe, but it remains the most terrifying instrument of conventional and nuclear deterrence in the sky. In the modern battle space, the B-52 does not fly low over the jungle dropping unguided iron bombs. It operates as a massive high-altitude, long-range missile truck. A single B-52 can carry an astonishing 70,000 pounds of precision-guided munitions. When operating out of the newly expanded RAAF base Tindal, these bombers will be loaded with AGM-158B Jasamir, Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile Extended Range, Stealth Cruise Missiles, or the Long-Range Anti-Ship Missile, RAAF. From the safety of Tindal, a squadron of 6 B-52s can launch, fly north through the uncontested, highly defended airspace of the Australian continent, and arrive at the edge of the Philippine Sea. Without ever entering the threat ring of Chinese land-based air defenses, those 6 bombers can unleash a synchronized, devastating swarm of hundreds of stealthy, autonomous cruise missiles capable of obliterating a Chinese naval armada or decapitating the artificial island fortresses in the South China Sea. But Tindal is not just a bomber base, it is a multi-domain intelligence hub. The $1.6 billion expansion includes the construction of highly classified subterranean squadron operations facilities. These bunkers are dug deep into the bedrock, heavily shielded against electromagnetic pulses (EMP), and completely immune to satellite surveillance. Inside these facilities, American and Australian intelligence officers will fuse real-time targeting data from space-based sensors, undersea drones, and cyber networks to generate the kill chains for the bomber fleet above. Furthermore, Tindal is being aggressively upgraded to support the MQ-4C Triton. The Triton is a massive high-altitude long-endurance, hail, maritime surveillance drone. It boasts a wingspan larger than a Boeing 737 and can fly continuously for over 24 hours at altitudes exceeding 50,000 feet. Operating from the new specialized facilities at Tindal, the Triton will act as the omniscient, unblinking eye of the Northern Engine. It will peer deep into the Indonesian archipelago and the South China Sea, tracking the movements of Chinese nuclear submarines and surface action groups. The Triton does not carry weapons, it carries the data. It will beam the exact coordinates of the enemy fleet down to the subterranean bunkers at Tindal, which will instantly relay the firing solutions to the B-52 bombers loitering over the Timor Sea. RAF base Tindal is no longer a bare base. It is a highly integrated, completely self-sufficient apex predator's nest. It is the command and control node, the sensor, and the shooter, all wrapped into a single heavily fortified $1.6 billion package. the brutal mathematics of survival. While the expansion of RAAF base Tindal is a masterpiece of strategic power projection, placing all of your most valuable, highly classified military assets into a single location is a mathematical vulnerability. The strategic planners in Beijing are not blind. They have satellites. They know exactly where Tindal is located. They know the exact GPS coordinates of the new bomber aprons and the intelligence bunkers. In the event of a total high-intensity conflict, Tindal, despite its immense distance from the Chinese mainland, will undoubtedly become a Tier 1 priority target for the PLA rocket force. While Tindal is incredibly difficult to hit due to the vast distances involved, the Chinese military possesses long-range strategic bombers, like the H-6K, capable of launching air-launched cruise missiles, as well as a growing fleet of nuclear attack submarines capable of firing land attack munitions from the Indian Ocean. If the Western Alliance concentrates its entire strike package at Tindal, they risk suffering the exact same fate they are trying to avoid in Guam. A single, lucky saturation strike that penetrates the layered air defenses could cripple the bomber fleet on the ground. To survive the modern era of hypersonic weapons, precision-guided munitions and pervasive satellite surveillance, you cannot rely on static defense. You cannot simply build thicker concrete walls and hope the enemy's missiles bounce off. You survive by ensuring that you are simply not there when the missile arrives. This is the brutal, unforgiving mathematics of survival. And it is the driving logic behind the United States Air Force doctrine known as Agile Combat Employment, ACE. The ACE doctrine dictates that air power must be decentralized. Instead of operating from massive, predictable megabases, fighter squadrons, bomber wings, and refueling tankers must be in a state of constant, unpredictable, chaotic motion. They must be capable of landing at an austere, remote airstrip, rapidly refueling with engines running, loading fresh munitions, and taking off again before the adversary's intelligence apparatus can process the satellite imagery and calculate a firing solution. But to execute the ACE doctrine, you need a massive, widely distributed network of capable runways. You need a web. And Australia is uniquely positioned to provide the largest, most impenetrable web on the planet. The shell game of the outback. This brings us to the rebirth of the remote, bare bases. While Tindal gets the headlines and the heavy bombers, a quieter, incredibly lethal billion-dollar expansion program is simultaneously occurring across the extreme northern and western edges of the Australian continent. The Australian Department of Defence is pouring massive capital into completely revitalising and heavily militarising bases like RAAF Base Learmonth on the rugged coastline of Western Australia, RAAF Base Curtin in the deep Kimberley region, and RAAF Base Sugar in the remote tropical expanse of far north Queensland. These bases form a geographical triangle that covers millions of square kilometres. The distance between Learmonth in the west and Sugar in the east is roughly equivalent to the distance between London and Moscow. The $1 billion-plus investment in these remote outposts is designed to support the ACE doctrine perfectly. The runways are being lengthened and strengthened. More importantly, they are building extensive networks of modular taxiways, dispersed parking revetments, and hardened aircraft shelters hidden within the surrounding bushland. In a time of crisis, the Royal Australian Air Force and the United States Air Force will not sit statically at Tindal or Darwin. They will initiate a continent-wide shell game. A squadron of F-35A Lightning II stealth fighters might land at RAAF Base Learmonth at dusk, refuel from a KC-30A multi-role tanker transport, sleep under camouflage netting, and launch before dawn to relocate to RAAF Base Curtin. The next day they might jump to Sugar. This relentless, unpredictable movement creates an absolute targeting nightmare for Chinese strategic planners. The kill chain for a long-range ballistic or cruise missile strike is highly complex. A Chinese satellite must pass over Australia, detect the presence of the F-35s at Learmonth, beam that imagery back to a command center in Beijing, where intelligence officers must analyze it, verify the target, and pass the coordinates to a submarine or bomber crew, who must then program the missiles and execute the launch. That process takes hours. By the time the Chinese cruise missile arrives at the GPS coordinates of RAAF Base Learmonth, the F-35s have been gone for 6 hours. The multi-million-dollar Chinese missile detonates uselessly on an empty stretch of reinforced concrete, while the Allied stealth fighters are safely rearming thousands of kilometers away in Queensland. This is the web of dispersal. By investing billions into these remote, secondary bases, the Anglosphere is ensuring that its high-value, low-density aviation assets are mathematically impossible to pin down. You cannot destroy an air force if you cannot find it. And in the vast, sprawling expanse of the Australian outback, Finding a constantly moving squadron of stealth fighters is a game the adversary simply cannot win. The fuel of empire. We have discussed the $1.6 billion apex predator nest at Tindal, and we have discussed the continent-wide shell game of the remote bear bases. But an F-35 stealth fighter and a B-52 strategic bomber share one fundamental, undeniable and fatal weakness. Without fuel, they are nothing more than incredibly expensive, highly classified museum pieces. Amateurs talk about tactics and weapons platforms, professionals talk about logistics. The harsh, unglamorous reality of high-intensity peer-to-peer combat is that it consumes resources at a rate that is difficult for the human mind to comprehend. A single B-52 Stratofortress holds over 47,000 gallons of aviation fuel. When a squadron of 6 B-52s, supported by a dozen F-35 escorts and a fleet of KC-30A refueling tankers, launches a single, coordinated strike package into the South China Sea, they are burning hundreds of thousands of gallons of specialized JP-8 or F-34 military-grade aviation turbine fuel in a matter of hours. In a protracted, grinding war of attrition against the Chinese military, the Northern engine will need to sustain that level of operational tempo day after day, week after week. Historically, this massive logistical requirement was the Achilles heel of the Australian continent. Australia imports the vast majority of its refined liquid fuels from mega-refineries in Singapore, South Korea, and other Asian nations. Those fuel shipments arrive via slow-moving, unarmored commercial tanker ships that must sail through the highly contested, easily blockaded choke points of the Indonesian archipelago. In a major conflict, the People's Liberation Navy would immediately target those commercial tankers. They would deploy their attack submarines to sever the maritime supply lines connecting the United States and Asia to the Australian continent. If the tankers stop arriving, the fuel tanks at Tindal, Learmonth, and Darwin run dry within weeks. The B-52s are grounded. The F-35s cannot launch. The massive, billion-dollar air bases become useless monuments of concrete. The Pentagon and the Australian Department of Defence recognized that building runways without securing the fuel supply was a recipe for catastrophic defeat. To make the Northern engine truly functional, they had to build the arteries of war. The sovereign sustainment grid. This realization has triggered a massive, highly classified, and fiercely urgent construction program across the top half of the Australian continent. The West is not just building bases, it is building a completely sovereign, blockade-proof, sustain and repair architecture. The United States Defense Logistics Agency, DLA, working in tandem with the Australian military, is currently funding and overseeing the construction of massive, strategic fuel reserves hidden deep within the outback. We are not talking about standard, above-ground commercial fuel tanks that can be easily spotted by satellites and destroyed by a single cruise missile. We are talking about heavily fortified, subterranean fuel farms. Massive, multi-million-gallon reservoirs excavated out of solid rock, lined with specialized polymers, and completely shielded from electromagnetic pulses, thermal signatures, and kinetic strikes. These massive fuel bunkers are being constructed adjacent to the primary strike bases like Tindal, as well as the dispersal bases like Learmonth and Shergar. Furthermore, the Alliance is aggressively expanding the pipeline infrastructure and the heavy-duty road and rail transport networks required to move this fuel securely across the vast distances of the continent. But it is not just about fuel. An empty bomber requires munitions just as desperately as it requires jet fuel. Simultaneously, the US and Australia are constructing vast, decentralized ammunition depots across the north. These hardened, climate-controlled bunkers are specifically designed to safely store and maintain the highly sensitive, incredibly expensive precision-guided munitions of the 21st century, weapons like the JSSMER, the long-range anti-ship missile RAAF, and the AIM-120 AMRAAM. By stockpiling massive reserves of fuel and ordnance directly on the Australian continent, years before a conflict even begins, the Anglosphere is executing the ultimate act of strategic deterrence. They are creating a closed-loop system. If the Chinese Navy successfully executes a total maritime blockade of the Pacific, severing the umbilical cord between the United States mainland and the Indo-Pacific theater, the Northern engine does not stop running. Because of the subterranean fuel reserves and the hardened munitions depots, the Allied air forces stationed in Australia can continue to launch relentless, devastating, high-tempo strike operations for months on end. They can continuously punish the adversary's fleet, degrade their air defenses, and sink their supply ships, operating entirely independently of external resupply. This sovereign sustainment grid proves to Beijing that they cannot win a war by simply cutting the supply lines. They cannot starve the Australian fortress. The arteries of war have been buried deep underground, and they are pulsing with the lifeblood of American and Australian combat power: the Impenetrable continental shield. When you synthesize the massive, disparate elements of this multi-billion-dollar construction blitz, a terrifying, highly integrated picture begins to emerge. The expansion of the military footprint in northern Australia is not a collection of isolated infrastructure projects. It is the deliberate, methodical construction of a single, unified weapon system. It is the awakening of the Northern Engine. The $1.6 billion expansion of RAAF base Tindal provides the heavy, devastating spearhead, capable of launching swarms of stealth cruise missiles from the untouchable sanctuary of the deep outback. The revitalization of the remote bare bases at Learmonth, Curtin, and Sherger provides the impenetrable web of dispersal, ensuring that the agile, fifth-generation fighter fleets can operate in a constant state of chaotic motion, making them mathematically impossible for the enemy to target. And the massive, subterranean construction of strategic fuel reserves and munitions depots provides the unbreakable arteries, guaranteeing that the war machine can sustain its lethal momentum even in the face of a total maritime blockade. Together, these elements transform the top half of the Australian continent into the ultimate anti-access/area denial, A2/AD, bubble. For years, Western analysts fretted over the A2/AD bubbles created by China in the South China Sea. But the Chinese fortresses are built on tiny, fragile, artificial reefs. They are isolated, incredibly vulnerable to concentrated strike, and possess zero strategic depth. The Australian A2/AD bubble is built on a continent. It is backed by an advanced, highly industrialized economy. It spans millions of square kilometers of hostile, unforgiving terrain. It is heavily defended by the world's most advanced over-the-horizon radar networks, layered air defense systems, and the combined aerospace might of the United States and Australia. It is an impenetrable continental shield, the ultimate Pacific launchpad. The strategic message being telegraphed by the pouring of this concrete is brutal, uncompromising, and absolutely crystal clear. The United States of America is not retreating from the Indo-Pacific. The Anglosphere is not ceding the first or second island chains to authoritarian dominance. By physically terraforming the Australian continent, by pouring billions of dollars into the red dirt, the free world is deeply, permanently entrenching itself. We are moving our most lethal, highly classified assets out of the vulnerable, exposed islands of the Central Pacific, and burying them safely within the massive, sovereign fortress of the Southern Hemisphere. When the strategic planners in Beijing look at their targeting maps today, they are forced to confront a geopolitical nightmare. They can no longer plan for a localized, highly constrained conflict over Taiwan or the Philippines. They must now factor in the reality that thousands of kilometers to their south, a massive, heavily fortified, fully fueled, and incredibly angry Northern Engine is waiting to be unleashed. They must calculate the cost of facing relentless swarms of B-52 bombers and F-35 stealth fighters, launching from bases they cannot reach, fueled by reserves they cannot destroy. The bare bases are gone. The outback has been militarized. The northern kill zone is fully operational. And the Australian continent has officially become the ultimate launchpad for the defense of the free world. Thanks for watching Doctrine of War. Do you believe that this massive infrastructure buildup in northern Australia is enough to deter a Chinese offensive in the Pacific, or is relying on air power from thousands of miles away a strategic mistake? Let us know your tactical assessment in the comments below. Stay sharp, stay resilient, and we'll see you in the next one.